Royal palaces around the world have stunning architecture and, of course, a majestic appearance. Ancient times are carefully preserved in every corner of these splendid palaces. Next I present you some information about the top of the most beautiful royal palaces on the planet. And I can say with all certainty that a visit to these palaces can truly be considered a divine experience. 10. Portugal's Palácio Nacional da Penha sits on a high hill with a panoramic view of Sintra. The palace was built in 1842 by King Ferdinand II and represents a supreme example of European Romanticism, being included among the 7 wonders of Portugal and on the UNESCO World Heritage List. The palace was built on the ruins of a monastery that collapsed in the Lisbon earthquake of 1755. With its beautiful red and yellow colors, under restoration, this palace is known to be one of Portugal's prestigious monuments. Occasionally, the palace is used by the President of Portugal and other state officials. 9. Mysore Palace, also known as Amba Vilas Palace, is a palace located in the city of Mysore, in southern India. This is the official residence of the ancient Wodeyar royal family and the palace houses 2 Durbar halls, ceremony hall of the royal court. The building was built according to the plans of the architect Henry Irwin and shocks at first sight with the pink domes that draw the eye to the high sky. The facade features 7 arches supported by tall pillars. Only the Taj Mahal Palace is said to be more successful, with over 2.7 million visitors a year. The construction dates back to 1912 and was erected for the 24th Prince Wodeyar after the previous one was damaged in a fire. From an architectural point of view, the monument belongs to the Indo-Saracenic style, combining a number of Hindu, Muslim and even Gothic elements. 8. Schönbrunn Palace. German Schloss Schönbrunn in Vienna, Austria, is a 1,441-room Rococo former imperial summer residence. As one of the most important cultural monuments in the country, it has been one of the most important tourist attractions in Vienna since the 1960s. The palace and gardens illustrate the tastes, interests and aspirations of the Habsburg monarchs. The palace is located west of Vienna's city center in the Hietzing district. Until 1642 it was called Katerberg. The name Schönbrunn, meaning beautiful fountain, comes from an artesian well whose water was consumed by courtiers. The sculpture garden between the palace and the sun fountain is called the Great Parterre. The French Garden, which occupies a large part of the area, was planned by Jean Trihet, a disciple of André Le Notre, in 1695. It contains, among other things, a labyrinth. The complex also includes many other attractions, apart from the zoo, an orangery built around 1755 and a palm greenhouse, replaced in 1882 by about 10 smaller greenhouses in the western part of the park, are worth noting. The western part was transformed into an English-style garden between 1828 and 1852. At the western end, a botanical garden was laid out in 1828, when the old greenhouse with palm trees was built. In 1996, Schönbrunn Palace and its gardens were inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List, as a remarkable Baroque ensemble and an example of the synthesis of the arts, Gesamtkunstwerk. 7. The Summer Palace is located in a garden located 12 kilometers from Beijing in the People's Republic of China. Since 1998 it is considered the common heritage of humanity. The palace is located in the middle of an extensive park of nearly 300 hectares, 3/4 of which is covered by water, on the shores of Kunming Lake, expanded to imitate Hangzhou's West Lake. It was originally built in 1750 by the Qianlong Emperor. In 1860 the palace was completely destroyed by French and British troops. It was restored and embellished by Empress Cixi in 1899. The Empress used it as a temporary residence from 1901 and it was the seat of government until 1908. Most of the edifices that make up the palace are located between Kunming Lake and the Millennium Hill. One of the most remarkable works is the Great Corridor, a roofed passage more than 750 meters long. The Empress ordered this corridor to be built so that she could move around the palace without being affected by the bad weather outside. The ceiling of the corridor is decorated with over 14,000 paintings or scenes from Chinese history. In the middle of the corridor is the Temple of the Imresmet Buddha, built on the Hill of Millennium Longevity. 6. The Palace of Versailles, also called Versailles Castle, in French Château de Versailles, is a royal castle built in Versailles, France. It was the residence of the French kings Louis XIV, Louis XV and Louis XVI. This castle ranks among the most remarkable monuments in France, not only for its beauty, but also for the events of which it was the theatre. It became the permanent royal residence from 1682, when King Louis XIV moved the court from Paris, until 1789, when the royal family was forced to return to the capital, except for a few years during the Regency. Versailles Castle is a symbol of the absolute monarchy adopted by Louis XIV. In this castle, in the Gallery of Mirrors, the Treaty of Versailles was signed. In 1837 the palace became France's first history museum. 5. Chambord Castle, located in Chambord, Loire-et-Cher, France, is one of the most famous castles in the world due to a very distinct French Renaissance architecture that combines traditional French style with Renaissance structures. The castle, the largest in the Loire Valley, was built in the heart of the largest closed forest park in Europe, 5,441 hectares. It was built by order of King Francis I between 1519 and 1547. 4. Buckingham Palace is the main London residence of the British monarchs. Originally known as Buckingham House, the building that forms the main part of the palace today was a house built for the Duke of Buckingham in 1705, which King George III bought in 1761 as a private residence for the Queen Charlotte, and was known as the Queen's House. During the 19th century it was enlarged, mainly by the architects John Nash and Edward Bloor, forming the three corners around the central courtyard. Buckingham Palace officially became the royal palace of the British monarch on Queen Victoria's accession to the throne in 1837, being the first monarch to have permanent residence here. The last structural changes were made in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, including the eastern facade of the palace, which includes the well-known balcony from where the royal family greets the crowds in Victoria Square. However, the palace chapel was destroyed by German bombs in World War II. In place of the chapel, the Galleria Reginae was built, which was opened to the public in 1926. 3. The Alhambra Palace in Granada, Spain, is one of the most important monuments of Islamic architecture. It, along with the Great Mosque of Córdoba, are the most prestigious evidence of the Muslim presence in Spain from the 8th to the 15th century. The word Alhambra comes from Alhamra, red in Arabic, due to the color of the rocks on which the palace is built. The Alhambra is a complex of buildings in a fortress that dominates the plain in the city of Granada, located in front of a popular and picturesque neighborhood, the Albaycin. From there you can see the snow-capped peaks of the Sierra Nevada. Among these buildings is a Moorish palace that glorifies this complex, as well as the Baroque palace of Charles V and a church built on the site of a former mosque. Despite the desire of the Catholic kings to erase the traces of Islam from the territories reconquered by the Christians after the fall of Granada in 1492, the Moorish palace was so beautiful that it could not be destroyed and remained in use as their royal palace. 2. The Potala Palace is a monastery in the city of Lhasa, Tibet, now an autonomous region of China. The palace is named after Mount Potalaka, the mystical abode of Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara. The Potala Palace was the residence of the Dalai Lama, the spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism, until 1959 when the Tibetan uprising occurred and the Dalai Lama fled to Dharamshala in India. Lezong Gyatso, the fifth Dalai Lama, began the construction of the Potala Palace in 1645 as the spiritual and political center of Tibet. The construction was completed in 1694. In a short time, Potala became the largest monastery in the world. The palace was slightly damaged by rockets fired by the Chinese during the Tibetan uprising. At that time about 100,000 sacred scriptures and historical documents inside the palace were destroyed. In 1994, the Potala Palace became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Today the palace is a museum, but also a spiritual center located at an altitude of 3,700 meters. 1. The Forbidden City was the Chinese imperial palace from the Ming dynasty to the end of the Qing dynasty. It is located in the center of Beijing, China, and currently houses the Palace Museum. For nearly 500 years it has served as the home of emperors and their families, as well as the ceremonial and political center of the Chinese government. Built between 1406 to 1420, the complex consists of 980 buildings and covers 720,000 square meters. The palace complex exemplifies traditional Chinese palace architecture, and has influenced cultural and architectural developments in East Asia and elsewhere. The Forbidden City was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1987, and is listed by UNESCO as the world's largest collection of preserved ancient wooden structures. Since 1925, the Forbidden City has been under the administration of the Palace Museum Institution, whose vast collection of artworks and artifacts was compiled from the imperial collections of the Ming and Qing dynasties. Part of the museum's former collection is now housed in the National Palace Museum in Taipei. Both museums had their beginnings within the same institution, but were separated after the Chinese Civil War.
If this material has piqued your interest, I invite you to like and subscribe to this channel. All the best.